Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Last Good Morning. Barrett Shepard woke at 6:47 a.m. to the sound of his daughter singing in the shower. 7-year-old Ada had her mother's voice clear and fearless, though Cara Moses hadn't sung in years, not since the divorce papers were signed 3 years ago. Barrett lay in bed listening, committing the moment to memory the way he'd learned to do with all good things, deliberately, knowing they were fragile. He'd built a career on understanding fragility. As a crisis management consultant, Barrett specialized in pulling people back from the edge, corporate scandals, public relations, nightmares, legal disasters. He'd saved careers, reputations, fortunes. He'd also destroyed a few, but only when they deserved it. The shower shut off. Barrett rose and headed to the kitchen. Their townhouse in Chapel Hill was modest by the standards of his clients, but it was theirs, his, and Ada's. The divorce had been civilized, almost surgical in its precision. Cara got the house in Durham, he got this place, and they shared custody 50-50. Cara had remarried last year to Reed Donovan, a cardiothoracic surgeon with kind eyes and a patient temperament. Barrett liked him. Ada loved him. That should have been harder than it was. "Morning, Dad." Ada bounded into the kitchen, wearing her favorite overalls and a Charlotte Hornets t-shirt. Her dark hair was still damp, pulled into a ponytail that would be lopsided by noon. "Morning, kiddo. Ready for our adventure?" They'd been planning this road trip for months, a weekend drive up the Blue Ridge Parkway, stopping at waterfalls and hiking trails. Just the two of them. Ada had been counting down the days on a homemade calendar, marking each one with increasingly elaborate drawings of mountains. "So, ready? Can we stop at that pancake place in Blowing Rock?" "Absolutely." Barrett poured coffee into his travel mug. "But first, breakfast here. Can't start an adventure on an empty stomach." As Ada demolished a bowl of cereal, Barrett's phone buzzed. A text from Norris Melendez, his business partner. "Heads up. Julius Ashley made parole. Heard he's been asking about you." Barrett's jaw tightened. He hadn't heard that name in 6 years. Julius Ashley. The tech entrepreneur who'd built a healthcare software empire, then used it to defraud insurance companies of $40 million. When whistleblowers came forward, Julius had tried to cover it up, going so far as to threaten them and their families. He'd hired Barrett to make the scandal disappear. Barrett had investigated, discovered Julius wasn't just committing fraud, he was actively tampering with patient data in ways that compromised medical care. People had died because of incorrect medication algorithms. Children had died. So, Barrett had gone to the FBI instead of spinning the story. Julius had screamed, threatened, pleaded. He'd lost everything. His company, his fortune, his freedom. 6 years in federal prison. And now he was out. Barrett deleted the message. Not today. Today was about Ada. About mountains and waterfalls and terrible road trip singing. Earth to Dad. Ada was waving a hand in front of his face. "Sorry, kiddo. Just thinking." "About work?" "Nope. About whether you can handle a 6-hour drive without complaining." "6 hours? You said 4. 4 if we don't stop. 6 with pancakes and waterfall detours." Ada grinned. "Deal." They loaded the car, Barrett's silver Volvo XC90, chosen for its safety ratings with backpacks, snacks, and Ada's stuffed raccoon named Professor Bandit. Barrett did a walk-around inspection, a habit from his days as a teenage mechanic working in his uncle's shop. Tires good. Oil checked last week. Everything perfect. By 8:30, they were on Highway 40, heading west. Ada controlled the music, cycling through a playlist that ranged from Taylor Swift to the Hamilton soundtrack. Barrett sang along badly, earning delighted criticism from his daughter. "Dad, you sound like Professor Bandit trying to bark." "Professor Bandit can't bark. He's a raccoon." "Exactly." The morning sun was bright, the sky cloudless. Barrett felt the tension from Norris's text beginning to fade. Julius was probably in New York or California, rebuilding his life. The man had no reason to come after Barrett after all these years. The FBI had the evidence regardless of Barrett's testimony. It was done. They were 30 miles west of Chapel Hill when Ada first complained about the AC. "Dad, it smells funny." Barrett sniffed. Funny how? Like, I don't know, sweet, but also like medicine. He increased the AC, thinking maybe dust had accumulated in the vents. Better? Yeah, maybe. But 10 minutes later, Ada spoke again, her voice smaller. Dad, my head really hurts, and I feel dizzy. Barrett glanced in the rearview mirror. Ada's face was pale, her eyes unfocused. Ada, look at me. He put on the hazards, looking for a place to pull over. How dizzy? Like you might throw up? Like everything's fuzzy. I don't feel good, Dad. His heartbeat accelerated. Barrett spotted a rest area ahead and took the exit faster than he should have, pulling into a parking spot away from other vehicles. He killed the engine and jumped out, opening Ada's door. Let's get you some fresh air. Ada stumbled out, and Barrett caught her. Her skin was clammy, her breathing shallow. I'm scared, Dad. I know, baby. I've got you. He carried her to a picnic table in the shade, setting her down gently. She leaned against him, trembling. Other travelers glanced over with concern, but no one approached. Barrett's mind raced through possibilities. Motion, sickness, food poisoning, dehydration. But the timeline was wrong for food poisoning, and Ada had never been motion sick before. And that smell she'd mentioned sweet and medicinal. He thought about the AC, about the smell, and suddenly, a cold clarity washed over him. Barrett returned to the Volvo, leaving Ada visible at the picnic table. He popped the hood and stared at the engine compartment. Nothing obviously wrong. He circled to the front passenger side, where the cabin air intake was located. With shaking hands, he unscrewed the access panel below the windshield. Inside the filter housing, wrapped in a clear plastic bag secured with zip ties, was a small pressurized canister connected to a digital timer. The timer's display read 0, but there was a second readout, 0.4 milliliters remaining. Barrett recognized it immediately. He'd seen something similar in a case 3 years ago involving an attempted murder in San Francisco. It was fentanyl, aerosolized fentanyl being pumped directly into the vehicle's air intake. Someone had tried to kill his daughter. His hands trembled as he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. Chapter 2. The Investigation. The rest area transformed into a crime scene within 20 minutes. 2 patrol cars, an ambulance, and a hazmat unit from the county. Ada was given oxygen and naloxone as a precaution, though the EMT said she'd likely only inhaled a small amount before Barrett pulled over. She's lucky, the EMT said, a woman in her 40s named Irma Hood. Another 10, 15 minutes, and we'd be having a different conversation. Barrett sat beside Ada in the ambulance, holding her hand while she breathed through an oxygen mask. Her color had returned, but she was frightened and confused. Someone hurt us, she whispered. Someone tried to, Barrett said carefully. But they failed. You're safe now. Will they try again? It was the question he'd been asking himself. No, I won't let them. Detective Carlo Hanna arrived 40 minutes later, a lean man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a patient demeanor. He spent 10 minutes examining the device in the Volvo before approaching Barrett. Mr. Shepard, I need to ask you some questions. They moved away from the ambulance. Detective Hanna pulled out a notepad. Do you have any idea who might have done this? Barrett had spent the last hour thinking about that question. Julius Ashley was the obvious answer, but he needed to be careful. If he pointed the police toward Julius without evidence, he could be accused of harassment, or worse, giving Julius ammunition for a defamation suit. I'm a crisis management consultant, Barrett began. I've made enemies. People whose careers I've damaged, whose secrets I've exposed. It's the nature of the work. Anyone specific come to mind? Several, but I'd rather not name names until I'm certain. Detective Hanna's expression hardened. Mr. Shepard, someone just tried to murder you and your daughter with military-grade fentanyl. This isn't the time for professional discretion. I understand, but I also know how investigations work. Point you in the wrong direction, and the real perpetrator gets away. Give me 24 hours to make some calls, and I'll have a better answer. It was a gamble. Detective Hanna could push harder, could threaten to charge Barrett with obstruction. But Barrett had learned to read people, and he saw a calculation in the detective's eyes. Hannah was smart enough to know that Barrett's professional network might yield better information than a premature list of suspects. 24 hours. Hannah said finally. But we're seizing your phone records, and we'll be monitoring your vehicle's GPS history. If you're planning something stupid, we'll know. I'm not planning anything except protecting my daughter. After giving his statement, Barrett drove Ada to the hospital in Chapel Hill in a police-escort vehicle since the Volvo was evidence. At the ER, they ran a full toxicology screen. The results confirmed minimal fentanyl exposure, not enough to cause lasting damage. Kara arrived at the hospital like a force of nature, Reed trailing behind her. "Oh my God, Ada!" She swept their daughter into her arms, tears streaming down her face. "Baby, are you okay?" "I'm fine, Mom. Dad saved me." Over Ada's head, Kara's eyes met Barrett's. In that moment, all the distance between them, the divorce, the separate lives evaporated. She mouthed two words, "Thank you." Reed shook Barrett's hand. "What do you need from us?" "Keep her safe," Barrett said quietly. "I need to figure out who did this, and I can't do that if I'm worried about Ada." "She's staying with us until this is resolved," Kara said firmly. "No arguments." Barrett didn't argue. He kissed Ada goodbye, promised to call every day, and watch them leave. Then he drove Reed's car on loan until Barrett could get a rental back to his townhouse. Inside, Barrett poured 3 fingers of bourbon and sat at his desk. His office was lined with case files, client records, and a wall of photographs documenting his successes. Saving a pharmaceutical CEO from a hostile takeover. Clearing a congressman of false corruption charges, exposing a Ponzi scheme before it collapsed. And there, buried in a file drawer, the Julius Ashley case. Barrett pulled it out and reviewed the details. Julius had been released from federal prison 3 weeks ago. Early release for good behavior. He'd moved to Greensboro, just an hour north of Chapel Hill. His parole conditions included no contact with Barrett or any of the whistleblowers, but parole conditions could be violated. But was Julius capable of this? The man Barrett had known was arrogant and ruthless, but this was different. This was calculated murder. This required planning, resources, connections. Barrett's phone rang. Norris Melendez. "I heard," Norris said without preamble. "Is Ada okay?" "She will be. Someone put fentanyl in my car's AC system." A long silence. "Julius?" "That's my assumption, but I need proof." "What do you need from me?" Norris was more than a business partner. They'd met 15 years ago when Barrett was still a corporate lawyer and Norris was a forensic accountant. They discovered they both had a talent for untangling messes and a low tolerance for corruption. They'd built their consulting firm on those principles. "Everything you can find on Julius since his release," Barrett said. "Bank accounts, associates, phone records, if you can get them. I want to know what he's been doing. That's going to require some gray area work." "I'm aware." "You sure about this? We could let the cops handle it." Barrett thought about Ada's pale face, her frightened eyes. "I'm sure." "Okay. Give me until tomorrow morning." After hanging up, Barrett opened his laptop and began his own research. He started with Julius's known associates, his former business partner, Ernest Rivas, who'd cooperated with the FBI and avoided prison. His ex-wife, Benita Fry, who'd divorced him immediately after his conviction. His attorney, Sandy Bond, who'd failed to keep him out of prison. None of them seemed likely to help Julius get revenge, but someone had. Someone with access to fentanyl, knowledge of cars, and no moral reservations about killing a child. Barrett was still researching at 2 a.m. when his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You should have helped me when you had the chance. Now you'll understand what it means to lose everything." Barrett stared at the message. It wasn't signed, but he didn't need a signature. Julius Ashley had just confirmed himself as the primary suspect. Barrett screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Detective Hannah with a single line. "This is the man who tried to kill my daughter. His name is Julius Ashley." Then he poured another bourbon and began planning his response. Chapter 3. The Pattern. Detective Hannah called at 7 a.m. "We picked up Julius Ashley at his apartment in Greensboro 2 hours ago," he said. "He's denying everything. Says his phone was stolen yesterday. Convenient. Very. His lawyer's already screaming about harassment. Claims Julius has been at his parole officer's office, doing community service, the model parolee. We're holding him for 48 hours while we investigate, but unless we find hard evidence, he walks. Barrett dressed and drove to his office in downtown Chapel Hill. The building was a renovated tobacco warehouse, all exposed brick and high ceilings. He found Norris already at his desk, surrounded by printouts and empty coffee cups. "Tell me you found something," Barrett said. Norris handed him a folder. "Julius has been busy. He's broke. The FBI seized most of his assets, but 3 weeks ago, someone wired him $50,000 from a shell company in the Cayman Islands." "Who owns the company?" "That's where it gets interesting. I traced it back through 6 layers of corporate entities. Final ownership? A woman named Cassandra Haas." Barrett didn't recognize the name. "Who is she?" "She's a pharmaceutical sales executive. 43 years old, lives in Raleigh. But here's the connection. 8 years ago, her brother died from complications after a hospital gave him the wrong medication. Want to guess what software the hospital was using? Ashley MedTech. Bingo. Cassandra sued Julius's company, but lost. The software was working as intended. The hospital staff made the error. She blamed Julius anyway, claimed the interface was intentionally confusing to generate more support fees. Barrett studied Cassandra's photograph. She had severe features, dark eyes that seemed to stare through the camera. "So, Julius gets out of prison," Barrett said slowly, "and Cassandra offers him money to help with his fresh start. But the money comes with strings. She wants revenge on the man who destroyed Julius's company. Which is you," Norris finished, and Julius, being broke and angry, agrees. It made sense, but it wasn't proof. "We need more. Can you trace the $50,000 to anything specific? Purchase of fentanyl? Maybe. Already on it. But here's another wrinkle." Norris pulled up a news article on his monitor. 2 months ago, a veterinary clinic in Raleigh was robbed. They took drugs, including a bottle of pharmaceutical-grade fentanyl. The clinic's security footage was wiped. Let me guess, Cassandra works near the clinic? Her office is 6 blocks away. Barrett felt the pieces coming together. She stole the fentanyl, gave Julius money and instructions, and he planted the device. But we still need evidence linking her to the theft or to Julius beyond the wire transfer. His phone rang. Detective Hannah again. "Julius's lawyer just filed for his release. He's got an alibi for the night before your road trip surveillance footage, showing him at a Greensboro bar until 2 a.m. No way he drove to Chapel Hill, rigged your car, and got back in time." "He had help," Barrett said. "A woman named Cassandra Haas. She's the money behind this. I'll look into her. But Barrett, even if you're right, we need hard evidence. Right now, all we have is a threatening text from a stolen phone and a wire transfer that could be explained away. Unless we find something concrete, both of them walk." After hanging up, Barrett sat in silence. He'd spent his career digging up dirt, finding the connections others missed. But this was different. This was personal. And the law was moving too slowly. "I have an idea," Norris said carefully. "But you're not going to like it." "Tell me." "We can't prove they did it, but we can make them prove they didn't. We set a trap. We make them think you're vulnerable. See if they try again. This time with the cops watching." Barrett shook his head. "Too risky. If something goes wrong, then we do what we do best. We investigate them until we find something that sticks. Pull every thread. Expose every secret. They made this personal. We make it professional." Over the next 3 days, Barrett and Norris worked around the clock. They pulled Cassandra's financial records legally through a forensic accountant who owed them a favor. They interviewed employees at the veterinary clinic. They tracked Julius's movements since his release. The pattern emerged slowly but clearly. Cassandra had been planning this for months, possibly years. She'd researched Julius in prison, established contact, offered him a partnership. When he was released, she'd funded his new life not out of kindness, but as an investment. She wanted revenge on Barrett, and Julius wanted the same. Together, they'd become dangerous. But they'd also become sloppy. The veterinary clinic employee who'd accidentally left a window unlocked the night of the robbery? She received a $5,000 deposit 2 days later from one of Cassandra's shell companies. The auto repair shop where Barrett's car had been serviced 2 days before the road trip, Julius had been seen in the parking lot, though he'd left when the owner approached. And most damningly, Cassandra's phone records showed 17 calls to a burner phone whose GPS location matched Julius's movements perfectly. Barrett compiled everything into a dossier and delivered it to Detective Hannah. "This is good work," Hannah admitted. "Circumstantial, but compelling. I'll bring them both in for questioning. And if they lawyer up and stay silent, then we keep digging. These cases take time, Barrett." But Barrett was done waiting. He protected his daughter, gathered evidence, played by the rules. Now it was time to play a different game. That night, Barrett made a call to a client from 3 years ago, a woman named Blanca Humphrey, who ran an investigative journalism outfit. She owed him. He'd saved her from a lawsuit that would have bankrupted her operation. "I need you to run a story," he said, "about a pharmaceutical executive who's been funding revenge schemes. About a tech entrepreneur who's violated parole to commit attempted murder. I'll give you everything: documents, witnesses, recordings." "This is the kind of story that ruins lives," Blanca said. "That's the idea." The article ran online the next morning. By noon, it had gone viral. By evening, Cassandra Haas's pharmaceutical company had suspended her pending an investigation. Julius Ashley's parole officer had requested an emergency hearing, and Barrett received a call from an unknown number. "You've made a terrible mistake." Cassandra's voice was ice cold. "You think this is over? It's just beginning." "Then let's finish it," Barrett said. "You tried to kill my daughter. Now I'm going to destroy everything you value. Your career, your reputation, your freedom. And when I'm done, everyone will know exactly what you are." He hung up and smiled. The game was just beginning. Chapter 4. The Counterattack. The article Blanca published didn't just go viral, it detonated. Within 48 hours, 3 major news outlets had picked up the story. Cassandra Haas's pharmaceutical company fired her. Julius Ashley was back in custody for violating parole, and Barrett's phone wouldn't stop ringing with interview requests. He declined them all. Ada was safe with Kara and Reed. The police had enough evidence to build a case. Barrett should have felt satisfied. Instead, he felt hollow. The trap he'd set had worked, but Cassandra's threat lingered in his mind. "You think this is over? It's just beginning." At his office, Norris was celebrating with expensive whiskey. "We did it," Norris said, pouring 2 glasses. "They're finished. Cassandra will face criminal charges for conspiracy to commit murder. Julius is looking at another decade in prison for parole violation. You won. Ada's safe. That's what matters." Barrett accepted the glass but didn't drink. "Something's wrong." "What do you mean?" "Cassandra is not stupid. Neither is Julius. They had to know that trying to kill me would bring this kind of heat. So why risk it? What was the end game?" "Revenge. That's the end game." "No." Barrett pulled up Cassandra's photograph on his computer. "Revenge is emotional, irrational. Everything about this plan was calculated. The fentanyl theft, the wire transfers through shell companies, the timing. This woman spent months planning. She wouldn't do all that just to make Julius happy." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying we're missing something." Barrett spent the evening reviewing every file, every document. Around midnight, he found a detail so small he'd almost missed it. 3 months ago, Cassandra had purchased a life insurance policy on her brother, Matthew Haas, who had died 8 years earlier. Not unusual, people do maintain policies on deceased relatives for various reasons. But this policy was different. It was a modified version that paid out only if new evidence of wrongful death emerged. And the beneficiary wasn't Cassandra. It was a foundation she'd created called the Matthew Haas Memorial Trust. Barrett dug deeper into the foundation. It was registered as a nonprofit dedicated to medical software safety advocacy. But its financials were strange. It had one major investor, a venture capital firm called Meridian Holdings. Meridian Holdings owned 12 companies, all in the healthcare space. And its CEO was someone Barrett recognized, Ernest Rivas, Julius's former business partner who'd cooperated with the FBI. The pieces rearranged themselves in Barrett's mind. This wasn't just revenge. This was a con. Ernest had cooperated with the FBI to avoid prison, but he'd also positioned himself to acquire Julius's company assets at a fraction of their value. Now, he was rebuilding the empire, but he needed capital. Cassandra's foundation, funded by a wrongful death claim against the dissolved Ashley MedTech company, could provide that capital if she could prove Julius had been negligent. But the original investigation had cleared the software. The only way to reopen the case was to prove Julius was still dangerous, still causing harm. Enter the attempted murder of Barrett Shepard and his daughter. If successful, it would have looked like Julius was continuing his pattern of recklessness with human life. Even if unsuccessful, the publicity would be enough to support a civil suit claiming continued pattern of negligence and endangerment. Cassandra would get her payout, Ernest would get his funding, and Julius, the useful idiot, would spend the rest of his life in prison. Barrett called Norris at 1 a.m. "We've been played," he said. "This was never about revenge. It's about money." He explained his theory. Norris was silent for a long moment. "If you're right, then Ernest Rivas is the one who orchestrated everything. Cassandra and Julius are just pawns. Which means Ernest is still out there, and he has no reason to stop. If this plan failed, he'll try something else. What do we do?" Barrett thought about Ada, safe in Kara's house. Thought about Cassandra and Julius in custody. Thought about Ernest Rivas, hiding behind layers of corporate entities and charitable foundations. "We prove it," Barrett said, "and then we destroy him." The next morning, Barrett reached out to someone he'd hoped never to contact again, his former mentor, Carol Morrison. Carol had taught Barrett everything about crisis management, how to read people, how to manipulate narratives, how to win. But Carol had also taught him when to cross lines, when ethics were negotiable. Barrett had walked away from that philosophy and built his own firm on different principles. Now, he needed Carol's particular expertise. They met at a diner outside Raleigh. Carol looked older, his hair completely gray, but his eyes were sharp as ever. "Barrett Shepard," Carol said, shaking his hand. "I heard about your daughter. I'm sorry. I need your help." Finally ready to play the game properly? Barrett bristled. "I need information on Ernest Rivas. He's behind what happened to Ada." Carol nodded slowly. "Ernest. I know him. He consulted with me about a year ago, wanted advice on reputation rehabilitation. I told him the best way to rehabilitate a reputation is to never damage it in the first place." "What did he want specifically?" "He wanted to position himself as a victim of Julius Ashley's schemes. Wanted media training, talking points, the whole package. I turned him down because I could tell he was lying. Whatever happened with Julius, Ernest was complicit. He's planning something bigger now," Barrett said. He explained the insurance scheme, the foundation, the connections to Cassandra. Carol listened carefully. "Smart. Risky, but smart. The problem is proving it. Ernest has insulated himself too well. You'd need someone on the inside, someone who could get you concrete evidence of coordination between Ernest and Cassandra. I'm open to suggestions. There's a lawyer who works for Meridian Holdings, woman named Joni Werner. She does all their contract work, including the paperwork for Cassandra's foundation. If there's evidence of the scheme, she has access to it." "Will she talk?" Carol smiled. "That depends on what you offer her. Joni's ambitious. She wants to make partner at a big firm, but Meridian's keeping her as a glorified document processor. Give her a chance to be the hero who exposed corporate fraud, and she might cooperate." Barrett met Joni Werner 3 days later at a coffee shop in downtown Raleigh. She was 32, sharp-featured, with the wary eyes of someone who'd been disappointed by the law more than once. "Mr. Shepard," she said cautiously, "I'm not sure why you wanted to meet." Barrett laid out his theory simply and directly. Joni's expression shifted from skepticism to interest to alarm. "If what you're saying is true," she said slowly, "then Ernest has been using my legal work to facilitate attempted murder." "That's exactly what I'm saying, and I need proof. Internal documents, emails, anything that shows coordination between Ernest and Cassandra. I could lose my license, go to jail. Or you could be the whistleblower who helped prosecute a conspiracy to commit murder. Your choice." Joni was silent for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone. "I'm going to regret this." Chapter 5. The evidence. Joni Werner delivered the documents 3 days later. Barrett and Norris reviewed them in the office, spreading printouts across the conference table. The paper trail was damning. Emails between Ernest and Cassandra, dating back 18 months, discussing opportunities for mutual benefit. A contract between Meridian Holdings and the Matthew Haas Memorial Trust, promising funding contingent on successful resolution of pending litigation. And most critically, a memo from Ernest to Cassandra with the subject line, Barrett Shepard, Timeline and Strategy. The memo outlined the entire plan. Recruit Julius upon his release, fund the attack on Barrett, use the publicity to support a wrongful death claim, leverage the claim for foundation funding. There was even a contingency plan if Barrett survived. Subject's credibility may be compromised through targeted media campaign, portraying him as paranoid, vengeful. This alternative approach carries less risk and may yield similar litigation advantages. This is it, Norris said, reading the memo for the third time. This proves everything. Barrett was already on the phone with Detective Hannah. I'm emailing you documents that prove Ernest Rivas orchestrated the attempt on my daughter's life. You need to arrest him immediately. Barrett, I can't just arrest someone because... Read the emails. He laid out the entire plan in writing. He's the puppet master. Julius and Cassandra were just following his script. There was a long pause. Send everything you have. I'll review it and consult with the DA. Barrett sent the files and then sat back, exhausted. They'd done it. They had the evidence. The system would work. Except the system didn't work. 2 days later, Detective Hannah called with bad news. The DA won't prosecute Ernest based on these documents. What? Why? The emails are ambiguous. His lawyers are arguing the Barrett Shepard memo was about a legitimate business strategy for responding to negative press, not about orchestrating murder. The contract with Cassandra's foundation is legal on its face. Without direct evidence that Ernest ordered the attack, we can't charge him with conspiracy. That's insane. The timeline alone proves. I know. But the DA thinks a jury would have reasonable doubt. Ernest has no direct connection to the fentanyl, to Julius's movements, to anything concrete. He's 3 layers removed from the actual crime. Barrett felt rage building in his chest. So, he walks? Unless you find something more explicit. Yes. He walks. After hanging up, Barrett threw his coffee mug across the room. It shattered against the brick wall. This is exactly what he planned for, Norris said quietly. He insulated himself. Even if we expose the connection, the law can't touch him. Barrett thought about Ada, about how close he'd come to losing her, about Ernest Rivas sitting in his office, celebrating his cleverness. The law can't touch him, Barrett repeated. But I can. Barrett. He tried to kill my daughter, Norris. He orchestrated the whole thing, and he's going to walk away because he was smart enough to use intermediaries. You think I'm going to let that stand? What are you going to do? Barrett didn't answer immediately. He thought about his career, his reputation, everything he'd built. He thought about the rules he'd followed, the lines he'd never crossed. Then he thought about Ada's frightened eyes in that ambulance. I'm going to give Ernest exactly what he gave me, Barrett said. A nightmare he can't escape. Over the next week, Barrett became someone he didn't fully recognize. He called in every favor, leveraged every connection, used every trick Carol Morrison had taught him, and a few Carol didn't know. First, he leaked the documents Joni had provided to 3 different investigative journalists. The stories that emerged painted Ernest as a sociopath who'd sacrificed his former partner and targeted a child to make money. Then, Barrett contacted every company in Meridian Holdings' portfolio. He provided evidence of Ernest's scheme, suggested that investing with someone willing to orchestrate murder was a liability risk. Within days, 4 companies pulled their funding. But that wasn't enough. Barrett created a website anonymous, untraceable, dedicated to exposing Ernest's crimes. He hired private investigators to follow Ernest, document his movements, find any additional dirt. He sent the information to Ernest's neighbors, his business associates, his family. He systematically destroyed Ernest's reputation, his business, his peace of mind. And when Ernest tried to fight back with lawsuits, Barrett was ready. He documented everything. ensured every action was technically legal. Ernest's lawyers found themselves fighting ghosts. 3 weeks into Barrett's campaign, Ernest called him directly. "You're destroying my life," Ernest said, his voice shaking. "Yes," Barrett said calmly. "That's the idea. I could have you killed. I have connections, resources." "No, you don't. I've already made sure of that. Your investors are gone. Your companies are failing. Your reputation is ash. You're alone, Ernest. And you're going to stay that way. The police can't prove I did anything. I don't need the police to prove it. I just need the world to believe it. And they do. You're finished." There was silence on the line. Then Ernest whispered, "What do you want?" "I want you to confess. Every detail. Recorded, signed. Give me that, and I'll stop. And if I don't, then I keep going until you have nothing left. Not your money, not your freedom, not your sanity. Your choice." The line went dead. But 2 days later, Barrett received a package. Inside was a USB drive containing a video confession, Ernest admitting to orchestrating the attack, to manipulating Julius and Cassandra, to everything. Barrett watched it once, then called Detective Hannah. "I have what you need," he said. Chapter 6. The Price. Ernest Rivas was arrested on a Tuesday morning. The charges included conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and criminal racketeering. His bail was set at $5 million, which he couldn't make. Julius Ashley, confronted with Ernest's confession, agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. Cassandra Haas did the same. The DA promised that all three would spend significant time in prison. Barrett should have felt victorious. Instead, he felt hollow. At Kara's house, he sat in the backyard watching Ada play with Reed's golden retriever. She seemed happy, unburdened by the knowledge of what had almost happened to her. Kara brought him a beer and sat down. "She's been asking about you," Kara said. "Wants to know when you're taking her on another road trip." "Soon," Barrett said. "When this is really over." "It is over, Barrett. They're all in custody." He shook his head. "It's not over until I know Ada's completely safe. Until I know no one else is out there planning another attack." "You can't control everything." "I can try." Kara studied him carefully. "You've changed. I can see it. Whatever you did to make Ernest confess, it wasn't just about justice, was it?" Barrett met her eyes. "No, it was about revenge." "And, do you feel better?" He thought about that. "I feel like I protected my daughter. That's enough." But it wasn't enough. Barrett knew that. He'd crossed lines, used methods he'd always avoided. He'd become the kind of person he'd spent his career fighting against. Back at his office, Norris was waiting. "We need to talk," Norris said. "About what?" "About this." Norris pulled up an article on his computer. It was about Barrett, titled "The Crisis Manager Who Became a Vigilante." The article detailed Barrett's campaign against Ernest, painting it as unethical and possibly illegal. "They're coming after you," Norris said. "Ernest's lawyers are claiming you coerced his confession through harassment. They're trying to get it thrown out. Let them try. I have documentation showing everything I did was legal." "Legal doesn't mean ethical, Barrett. You crossed lines. You know you did." "I'd cross them again to protect Ada." "I know. That's what worries me." Norris stood up. "I'm not judging you. What you did worked. But it changed something. In you. In how people see us. We built this firm on integrity. And now, I don't know what we are anymore." Barrett felt anger rising. We're people who get results. We're people who don't let monsters hide behind technicalities. We're people who became what we fought against. The words hung in the air like an accusation. That night, Barrett couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Norris's words, about the person he'd become. He'd won. Ada was safe. The bad guys were in custody. But the victory tasted like ashes. At 3 a.m., his phone rang. "Detective Hannah." "You need to come to the station," Hannah said. "Now." "What happened?" "Ernest Rivas tried to hang himself in his cell an hour ago. He's alive, but barely. And he left a note. You need to see it." Barrett drove to the police station in a daze. In an interview room, Hannah showed him a photograph of the note, written in shaky handwriting. I did it all. But Barrett Shepard is worse than me. He destroyed my life for revenge, not justice. Who's the real monster? Barrett stared at the words. Is he right? Hannah asked quietly. I don't know, Barrett admitted. When he got home, the sun was rising. Barrett sat on his porch, drinking coffee, watching the neighborhood wake up. His phone buzzed. A text from Ada. Love you, Dad. Can't wait for our next adventure. Barrett smiled despite everything. That's what mattered. Not Ernest's words, not Norris's doubts, not the articles questioning his methods. Ada was safe. She was happy. She loved him. That was enough. It had to be enough. Chapter 7. The Trap. 3 months after Ernest's arrest, Barrett received an email from an address he didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You missed one." The email contained a single attachment, a photograph of Ada walking to school with Kara. Barrett's blood ran cold. He immediately called Kara. "Get Ada and go to Reed's hospital," he said urgently. "Stay in his office. I'm calling the police." "Barrett? What's—" "Just do it. Now." He forwarded the email to Detective Hannah and then called Norris. "Someone else is involved," Barrett said. "Someone we missed." "That's impossible. We tracked everyone connected to Ernest." "Apparently, not everyone." Barrett spent the next hour reviewing every file, every connection. Then he found it buried in Ernest's financial records. A payment to someone called RS Consulting made 6 months ago. $20,000. RS. Those initials were familiar. Barrett pulled up the list of names from the Julius Ashley case. And there it was, Roscoe Strickland, the former IT director at Ashley MedTech. He'd been fired when the company collapsed, but had never faced criminal charges. Barrett had forgotten about him entirely. A quick search revealed Roscoe now ran a cybersecurity consulting firm in Durham. Barrett called immediately, but got voicemail. He drove to the office address listed online, a small building in Research Triangle Park. The office was empty, recently vacated. On the desk, Barrett found a note. "You ruined my life twice. Once when you destroyed Ashley MedTech, again when you went after Ernest. Now it's my turn." Barrett's phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, Barrett." Roscoe's voice was calm, almost cheerful. "I wanted to make sure you got my message." "What do you want?" "The same thing you wanted from Ernest. Justice. Revenge. Whatever you want to call it. I'll find you. I'm sure you'll try. But I'm better at hiding than Ernest was. Better at planning too. You see, I've spent 3 months studying you, learning your patterns. I know where Ada goes to school, where Kara works, where Reed operates. I know everything." Barrett felt his chest tighten. "If you touch my daughter, I'm not going to touch her. Yet. First, I'm going to make you suffer the way you made me suffer. I'm going to destroy everything you care about. You won't get away with this." "I already have." The line went dead. Barrett immediately contacted Detective Hannah, explained the situation. Police were dispatched to protect Kara, Reed, and Ada, but Roscoe had vanished. Over the next week, strange things began happening. Barrett's office was broken into, though nothing was stolen. His car was vandalized. His clients received anonymous emails making false accusations about his ethics. And every few days, he'd receive another photograph. Ada at a park, Kara at a grocery store, Reed leaving the hospital. Roscoe was everywhere and nowhere, taunting him. "We need to draw him out," Norris said. "Set a trap." "How? He's not stupid enough to come after me directly." "No, but he might be arrogant enough to try proving he's smarter than you." Barrett thought about that. Roscoe was an IT expert, someone who understood systems and security. He'd been humiliated twice, once by the FBI investigation, once by Barrett's campaign against Ernest. His ego was fragile. "We make him think he's won," Barrett said slowly. "We give him a target he can't resist." They crafted a plan. Barrett would hold a press conference announcing his retirement from crisis management, claiming the Ernest Rivas case had broken him. He'd position himself as defeated, vulnerable. The press conference was held at a hotel in Raleigh. Barrett delivered his prepared statement, his voice shaking convincingly. "The last few months have taken their toll." he said to the assembled reporters. I crossed lines I shouldn't have crossed. I hurt people in the name of protecting my daughter. I can't do this work anymore. The performance was perfect. That night, the story ran on every news outlet. Barrett Shepard, the man who'd taken down Ernest Rivas, was admitting defeat. 2 days later, Barrett received an email from Roscoe. Meet me at the place where Julius fell. Midnight tonight. Come alone, or Ada dies. The place where Julius fell, the parking garage, where Julius had been arrested 3 months ago. Barrett showed the email to Detective Hannah. It's a trap, Hannah said. I know, but it's also our chance. He's getting cocky. We can have a full tactical team in position. No, if he sees police, he'll disappear again. We do this my way. That night, Barrett drove to the parking garage. It was nearly empty, just a few cars scattered across multiple levels. He parked on the 3rd floor and walked to the spot where Julius had been arrested. Roscoe was waiting, leaning against a concrete pillar. He was in his 40s, thin, with nervous energy. You came, Roscoe said. You threatened my daughter. Of course I came. Good. I wanted to see your face when I tell you what I've done. Roscoe pulled out a phone. This has access to your computer, your email, your bank accounts. I've documented every questionable thing you've done in the last 3 months. And tomorrow, I'm releasing all of it to the press. Why? Because you need to understand what it's like to lose everything. Your reputation, your business, your integrity. Just like I lost mine. Barrett stepped closer. Ernest used you. Julius used you. You're not a victim, Roscoe. You're a collaborator. I was trying to save the company. The software wasn't flawed, the hospitals were using it wrong. But no one wanted to hear that. They wanted a villain, and Julius became one. And you? You made sure of it. Julius killed people through negligence. You helped cover it up. And you destroyed innocent lives for revenge. Roscoe's hand was shaking. You're no better than any of us. Maybe, Barrett said quietly, but I'm still standing, and you're about to go to prison. Roscoe laughed. You think the police are here? I've been monitoring every frequency. This building is empty except for us. You're right about that. Barrett pulled out his own phone. But you're wrong about being safe. On the screen was a live video feed showing Roscoe from multiple angles. Cameras that Barrett had installed the previous night, hidden throughout the garage. Every word you've said has been recorded, Barrett continued, including your confession to hacking my systems, to stalking my family, to threatening my daughter. You wanted to prove you were smarter than me. Instead, you gave me everything I needed to destroy you. Roscoe's face went pale. You planned this. Every detail. The press conference, the fake defeat, this meeting. I knew you couldn't resist gloating. That's your weakness, Roscoe. You need validation. Police sirens echoed through the garage. Roscoe looked around wildly, then ran for the stairs. But Detective Hannah was already there, weapon drawn. Roscoe Strickland, you're under arrest. As police handcuffed Roscoe, he screamed at Barrett. You're a monster. You manipulate everyone. Barrett walked over and looked him in the eyes. I'm a father who protects his daughter, and you're a fool who underestimated me. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. Roscoe Strickland's trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. His confession, the hacking tools found at his apartment, the threatening emails. He was convicted of cyberstalking, harassment, and attempted extortion. Judge Sybil Rios gave him 5 years in federal prison. At the sentencing, Barrett sat in the courtroom gallery. Roscoe turned to look at him one final time. Was it worth it? Roscoe asked. Becoming what you hated? Barrett didn't answer. He didn't need to. But the question haunted him as he drove back to Chapel Hill. He'd won every battle. Julius was serving 20 years. Ernest had received 40 years after his suicide attempt failed. Cassandra had gotten 15 years with a chance for parole. And now Roscoe was heading to prison too. Barrett had protected Ada, exposed corruption, delivered justice. But he'd also crossed lines he'd once considered sacred. He'd manipulated people, destroyed reputations, used tactics he'd criticized in others. The firm he'd built on integrity now operated in shades of gray. At his office, Norris was packing boxes. What are you doing? Barrett asked. Leaving, Norris said quietly. I'm sorry, Barrett. I can't do this anymore. Because of what happened with Roscoe? Because of all of it. You got results. Ada's safe. But the methods, they changed you. Changed us. This isn't the firm I wanted to build. Barrett felt something crack inside him. So, you're just walking away? I'm walking towards something better. Something cleaner. Norris met his eyes. I'm not judging you, Barrett. What you did to protect Ada. I understand it. But I can't be part of it anymore. After Norris left, Barrett sat alone in the office. The walls were covered with photographs of successful cases, satisfied clients, problems solved. But now they looked different. Each victory had required compromise, required him to become a little more like the people he was fighting. His phone rang. Kara. Ada wants to see you, she said. She's been asking all week. Barrett drove to Kara's house. Ada ran out to meet him, throwing her arms around his waist. Dad, you haven't visited in forever. I know, kiddo. I've been busy. With work? With work. They sat on the porch swing, Ada chattering about school, about her friends, about the books she was reading. Barrett listened, really listened, trying to remember when he'd last done this without thinking about cases and enemies and revenge. Dad? Ada looked up at him. Are the bad people all gone now? Yes. They're all gone. Good. She hugged him tighter. I was scared for a while, but I knew you'd keep me safe. You always do. Barrett felt tears threatening. Always, kiddo, always. That night, alone in his townhouse, Barrett made a decision. He called Carol Morrison. I need to shut down the firm, Barrett said. What? Why? Because Norris was right. I became what I fought against, and if I keep going, I'll keep sinking deeper. So, what will you do? I don't know yet. Something different. Something that doesn't require me to destroy people. Carol was silent for a moment. You did good work, Barrett. You protected your daughter. Don't let guilt poison that. I'm not guilty about protecting Ada. I'm guilty about enjoying it. About how easy it became to hurt people. Then stop, Carol said simply. You proved you can play dirty. Now prove you can stop. The next morning, Barrett met with his remaining clients and referred them to other consultants. He filed paperwork to dissolve the firm. He cleared out his office, boxing up 15 years of work. On his last day, he found a note taped to his desk. It was from Norris. You're a good man who did what he had to do. Don't forget that. But don't forget who you wanted to be, either. There's still time to become him. Barrett folded the note and put it in his pocket. Outside, the sun was setting. Barrett drove to Ada's school and waited in the pickup line. When she came out, she was surprised to see him. Dad, what are you doing here? I thought we could get ice cream. Just the two of us. Really? But it's a school night. Sometimes school nights need ice cream. They went to Ada's favorite place, a local shop with absurd flavors like Unicorn Dreams and Cookie Monster Chaos. Ada ordered a triple scoop. Barrett got vanilla. As they ate, Ada talked about her day, about her math test, about the frog they'd studied in science class. Normal, beautiful, boring childhood things. And Barrett realized this was what victory actually looked like. Not courtrooms or confessions or criminals behind bars. Just him and his daughter, eating ice cream, safe. Chapter 9. The Shepherd's Peace. 6 months later, Barrett opened a small consulting practice focused on ethics compliance for nonprofit organizations. No more crisis management, no more fighting in the gray areas. Just helping good people do good work. The pay was terrible compared to his old firm, but he didn't care. Ada came to visit his new office, a modest space above a coffee shop. It's smaller than your old place, she observed. But it has better coffee, Barrett said, gesturing to the shop below. Will you be happy here? It was such a perceptive question for a 7-year-old. Barrett knelt down to her level. I'm happy wherever you are, kiddo. The office is just where I work. You're what matters. Ada hugged him. I love you, Dad. Love you too. That weekend, Barrett took Ada on the road trip they'd planned 6 months earlier, the Blue Ridge Parkway. Waterfalls, hiking trails. This time in a rental car, checked thoroughly by a mechanic Barrett trusted. They stopped at the same rest area where the nightmare had begun. Barrett pulled over, and they got out. "This is where it happened, isn't it?" Ada asked. Barrett was surprised she remembered. "Yes. I don't feel scared anymore." "Good. That's good." They stood together, looking at the mountains in the distance. The autumn leaves were turning, painting the landscape in reds and golds. "Dad," Ada said, "thank you for protecting me." "That's what dads do." "Yeah, but I know it was hard. I know you had to do things you didn't want to do." Barrett looked down at his daughter, struck by her understanding. "How do you know that?" "Because you've been sad sometimes. Even when you smile, I can tell." He sat down on a picnic bench, and Ada sat beside him. "You're right," Barrett admitted. "I did things I'm not proud of. But I'd do them again if it meant keeping you safe." "Would you do different things? If you could do it over?" It was a question Barrett had asked himself many times. "I don't know. Maybe. But I can't change what happened. I can only try to be better going forward." "That's what my teacher says. She calls it growth mindset." Barrett smiled. "Your teacher sounds smart." They continued their road trip, stopping at waterfalls and small-town diners. They hiked through forests and sang terrible songs in the car. Ada fell asleep during the drive home, her head against the window, Professor Bandit clutched in her arms. Barrett drove carefully, watching the road, thinking about the past year. He'd lost Norris's partnership. He'd lost his firm. He'd lost his reputation as someone who operated with perfect integrity. But he'd kept Ada safe. And that was the only victory that truly mattered. When he carried Ada into Kara's house, Reed met him at the door. "She's exhausted," Barrett said. "Perfect trip, then." Reed helped get Ada to her room. When they came back down, Kara was waiting with coffee. "How are you really doing?" Kara asked. "Honestly, better than I expected. The new work is satisfying. Simpler, but satisfying." "No regrets?" Barrett thought about that. "I regret that it had to happen. I regret that Ada had to be scared. But do I regret protecting her? Never." "Good," Kara said simply. "Because you did the right thing, all of it. Even the parts that weren't technically legal? Especially those parts." Kara met his eyes. "You could have let the system handle everything. You could have been patient and hoped justice worked out. But someone tried to murder our daughter, Barrett. I'm glad you didn't play nice." It was absolution he didn't know he needed. Barrett felt some of the weight he'd been carrying begin to lift. A month later, Barrett received a letter from federal prison. It was from Ernest Rivas. "Dear Mr. Shepard, I wanted you to know that I understand now what you did and why. I spent months being angry, blaming you for my imprisonment. But therapy and time have given me perspective. What I did was monstrous. I convinced myself I was just making smart business decisions, but I put a child in danger. Your child. And I did it for money. You made me pay for that in ways the law couldn't. You destroyed my reputation, my business, my peace of mind. At first, I hated you for it. Now I think maybe I needed it. The legal system gave me 40 years in prison. You gave me something worse, the certainty that everyone knows exactly what I am. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm just saying, I understand. You're a father who protected his daughter. I can't fault you for that. I hope Ada is doing well. I hope you both find peace. Ernest Rivas." Barrett read the letter twice, then filed it away. It didn't change anything, but it was something. On Ada's 8th birthday, Barrett threw her a party at a local park. Kids from her school ran around playing games while parents chatted over cake and coffee. Kara and Reed were there, along with Ada's grandparents. Even Norris showed up, bringing a gift and a tentative smile. "Nice party," Norris said. "Thanks for coming. How's the nonprofit work?" "Fulfilling. Quiet. How's your new firm?" "Good. Different. I miss working with you sometimes." "Yeah," Barrett said. "I miss it too." They stood in comfortable silence, watching Ada laugh with her friends. "You did good, Barrett," Norris said finally. "With everything, you kept her safe. That's what matters. I keep telling myself that. You should listen." As the sun set, Ada ran over to Barrett, her face flushed with happiness. "Best birthday ever," she declared. "Better than last year's?" Way better. She hugged him tight. Thanks, Dad. Barrett held his daughter, surrounded by friends and family, and felt something he hadn't felt in months, complete peace. He'd fought monsters and become a little monstrous himself. He'd crossed lines and paid prices. He'd lost things he valued and gained perspective he hadn't wanted. But his daughter was safe, happy, loved, and in the end, that was the only story that mattered. Not the revenge, not the victories, not the moral compromises. Just a father and daughter, together, safe. The shepherd had protected his flock. The cost had been high, but the alternative had been unthinkable. Barrett had no regrets. 3 years later, Barrett was invited to speak at a conference on ethical crisis management. He almost declined, but Ada convinced him to accept. You should tell people about what happened, she said. She was 11 now, thoughtful and perceptive. Not just the scary parts, the parts about choosing between what's right and what's legal. So Barrett stood at a podium in front of 200 professionals and told his story. Not all of it, some details remained private, but enough. He talked about the attempted murder, about the investigation, about the choice he'd faced, trust the system or take matters into his own hands. I chose revenge, he admitted. I chose to destroy the people who'd threatened my daughter, and I succeeded. But I also lost parts of myself in the process. Parts I'm still trying to recover. He paused, looking at the audience. If I had to do it again, knowing what I know now, I'd make the same choices, because my daughter is alive and safe. But I'd also warn myself about the cost. Victory isn't always worth the price you pay for it. After the speech, a young woman approached him. She introduced herself as a crisis consultant dealing with a case involving threats against a client's family. What would you do? She asked. Barrett thought carefully before answering. I'd protect them first, worry about ethics second, but I'd also remember that you can't unring bells. Once you cross certain lines, you can't uncross them. So cross them deliberately, knowing the cost. And if the legal system fails, then you become the system, Barrett said. But you pay for that power, always. That night, Barrett drove home thinking about the speech, about the woman's questions, about his own answers. He'd spent 3 years trying to become who he was before the attack. But maybe that wasn't possible. Maybe the person he'd become, someone who'd crossed lines to protect his family, was who he was now. And maybe that was okay. At home, he found Ada doing homework at the kitchen table. She looked up and smiled. How'd it go? Good. Strange. Made me think about everything that happened. Do you wish it hadn't happened? I wish you hadn't been in danger. But I don't wish I hadn't protected you. Ada closed her textbook. Dad, I know you did bad things to protect me. Mom told me some of it. And I just want you to know, I don't think you're bad. I think you're my dad, and you did what dads do. Barrett felt tears threatening. Thank you, kiddo. Plus, those guys were super bad. Like, villain bad. So you were kind of a superhero. He laughed despite himself. I don't think superheroes blackmail people. Depends on the superhero. Ada grinned. Batman totally does. Later, lying in bed, Barrett thought about Ada's words. You did what dads do. Maybe that was all the absolution he needed. Not from judges or juries or ethics boards. Just from his daughter, who understood that love sometimes required darkness. He'd been the shepherd, protecting his flock. He'd been the monster, hunting monsters. He'd been the vigilante, when the system failed. And he'd been the father, always. That was enough. It had to be enough. And finally, after 3 years, Barrett Shepard believed it was. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation Cracks. Derek Thornton stood in his mahogany-paneled study, watching the rain streak down the floor-to-ceiling windows of his estate. At 42, he had built an empire from nothing, a chain of luxury hotels that stretched across the East Coast. His calloused hands, now manicured but still bearing the scars of his construction worker days, gripped a crystal tumbler of aged bourbon. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd grown up in a trailer park in rural Tennessee, where his alcoholic father had beaten him senseless every night until Derek grew big enough to fight back. At 16, he put his father in the hospital and never looked back. No family, no safety net, just raw determination and a promise to himself that he'd never be vulnerable again. That promise had served him well until he met Ashley Greenwood at a charity gala 7 years ago. She was everything he wasn't: old money, sophisticated, effortlessly elegant. Her family had owned textile mills for generations before selling to focus on philanthropy. Where Derek was sharp edges and controlled fury, Ashley was silken grace. "You're like a beautiful predator," she'd whispered to him on their third date, tracing the scar above his left eyebrow. All that danger wrapped in an expensive suit. He should have listened to the warning in her voice. Their marriage had been a merger of his new money and her established pedigree. Derek provided the financial empire. Ashley provided the social connections and respectability his business needed to break into the upper echelons of society. For 5 years, it worked perfectly. She played the devoted wife at board meetings and charity functions, while he built their wealth and power. Tyler, their son, had been the unexpected gift that made Derek believe in something beyond profit margins. The boy had Derek's sharp intelligence, but Ashley's natural charisma. At 13, Tyler could discuss business strategy with Derek's executives and charm Ashley's society friends with equal ease. But Derek had made a critical error. He'd allowed himself to love them both completely. The first crack appeared 6 months ago when Derek noticed Ashley's schedule changing. Gallery openings that ran too late, spa weekends that seemed to multiply, phone calls that ended abruptly when he entered the room. His investigative instincts, honed from years of vetting business partners, began to surface. Derek had learned long ago that information was power, and power was survival. Within 2 weeks, he had a comprehensive dossier on his wife's activities. The photographs were professionally shot, clinically detailed, and absolutely devastating. Ashley and Brad Sinclair, Derek's business partner and supposed best friend, locked in passionate embraces at the downtown penthouse Derek had bought for executive meetings. The same penthouse where Derek had celebrated landing their biggest hotel contract just 3 months prior. Brad Sinclair, the golden boy from California who'd joined Derek's company 5 years ago with venture capital backing and an MBA from Stanford. Derek had seen potential in the younger man's aggressive sales tactics and had gradually given him more responsibility. Brad had access to Derek's business accounts, his personal schedule, his family's private moments. The betrayal was surgical in its precision. Derek spent the next month in methodical preparation. He hired additional private investigators, forensic accountants, and security specialists. What he discovered made his blood run cold with a fury he hadn't felt since putting his father down. Brad wasn't just sleeping with Ashley. He was systematically positioning himself to take over Derek's company. The younger man had been courting Derek's investors, suggesting that Derek was becoming unstable and needed to step back. Brad had convinced Ashley to sign documents that would give her significant control over Derek's assets in the event of a divorce. They weren't just having an affair. They were orchestrating a coup. The final piece fell into place when Derek reviewed the timeline. Ashley had been feeding Brad information about Derek's business deals, his strategies, even his private conversations. The hostile takeover attempt that Derek's company had successfully defended against last year, Brad had been feeding intelligence to the attackers while publicly standing beside Derek. Derek poured another bourbon and opened the hidden safe behind his desk. Inside were the original documents he'd prepared: divorce papers, custody arrangements, and a complete reorganization of his business empire. Everything was designed to be swift and final. But as he reviewed the papers, a different plan began to form. Derek Thornton didn't just want to win. He wanted to destroy everyone who had betrayed him so completely that they would never recover. And he wanted them to know, with absolute clarity, that their destruction was his design. He locked the documents back in the safe and reached for his phone. "Mitchell," he said when his lawyer answered, "I need you to draft some new papers, and I want you to arrange a meeting with Ashley and Brad tomorrow. Tell them I want to discuss expanding Brad's role in the company." As Derek hung up, a smile played across his lips for the first time in months. They wanted to play games with a man who had fought his way out of hell. They were about to learn why Derek Thornton never forgot a betrayal and never forgave one. Chapter 2. The Setup. The conference room at Thornton Hotel's headquarters felt different to Derek as he watched Ashley and Brad enter together. They maintained careful distance, their interactions professionally cordial. But Derek could see the subtle signs now. The way Ashley's fingers briefly touched Brad's wrist when she passed him the coffee, the synchronized timing of their arrival. "Derek, you look tired," Ashley said, settling into her chair with practiced grace. She wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. "Have you been sleeping?" "Fine," Derek replied, studying her face. After 15 years together, he could read her micro-expressions like a balance sheet. The slight tightness around her eyes, the way she pressed her lips together when she thought he wasn't looking, she was nervous. Brad Sinclair lounged in his chair with characteristic confidence, his blonde hair perfectly styled, his smile as sharp as his Italian suit. "So what's this about expanding my role?" "I have to say, I'm excited about the possibilities." Derek placed a folder on the polished table. "I've been thinking about succession planning. The company's at a point where I need to consider the next generation of leadership." He watched Brad's pupils dilate slightly, a tell Derek had learned to spot in countless negotiations. The younger man was practically salivating. "I want to propose something unconventional," Derek continued. "Brad, you've proven yourself invaluable to this company. Your strategic thinking, your relationship-building skills." Derek paused, letting the word relationship hang in the air for just a moment longer than necessary. "I think you're ready for more responsibility." Ashley leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I want to make Brad a full partner. 50-50 ownership of Thornton Hotels." The silence in the room was deafening. Derek could practically hear their hearts racing. Brad's mask slipped for just an instant, revealing naked ambition before he recovered. "Derek, that's incredibly generous. But are you sure? This company is your life's work." "I'm getting older," Derek said, allowing a hint of weariness to creep into his voice. "And I want to enjoy my family while I can. Tyler's growing up fast, and Ashley..." He reached across the table to squeeze his wife's hand. She didn't pull away, but her fingers were cold as ice. "I want to travel with my beautiful wife. See the world beyond balance sheets and board meetings." Ashley's smile was radiant and completely false. "Derek, that sounds wonderful, but this is such a big decision. Shouldn't we discuss this privately first?" "Actually," Derek said, opening the folder, "I've already had the preliminary papers drawn up. Of course, there are conditions." Brad's eyes sharpened. "What kind of conditions?" Derek slid the documents across the table. "Standard partnership agreement. Brad would take over day-to-day operations immediately. I'd retain voting rights on major decisions for the first year, then gradually transfer full control. The only significant clause is the morality provision." "Morality provision?" Ashley asked, her voice carefully neutral. "If either partner engages in conduct that materially damages the company's reputation or violates the trust necessary for effective partnership." Derek paused, meeting Brad's eyes directly. "The other partner can terminate the agreement and buy out the offending party's shares at fair market value." Brad relaxed visibly. "That seems reasonable. What constitutes conduct that damages the company?" Derek's smile was cold. "Fraud, embezzlement, criminal activity, public scandal that affects our relationships with investors or clients. Anything that breaks the trust between partners." You could see Brad's mind working, calculating angles and risks. The younger man was probably thinking about his careful planning, how he'd avoided leaving paper trails, how he'd been discreet about the affair. "I'd like to review this with my attorney," Brad said finally. "Of course. Take all the time you need. But I'd like an answer by the end of the week." Derek stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "I'm hoping to make the announcement at the board meeting next month." As they gathered their things, Derek noticed Ashley and Brad carefully avoid looking at each other. Good. They were off balance, uncertain whether this was a trap or an unexpected gift. After they left, Derek made a phone call to his head of security, a former FBI agent named Rodriguez who'd helped Derek investigate the affair. Rodriguez, I need you to increase surveillance on both targets. I want to know every conversation, every meeting, every breath they take over the next week. Already on it, boss. They're going to slip up. Derek's second call was to his lawyer. Mitchell, did you include the additional clause we discussed? The one about partnership dissolution in cases of adultery? Yes, though it's buried in subsection 7 of the morality provisions. They'll need to read very carefully to spot it. Derek's third call was to his private investigator. I need you to prepare the comprehensive evidence package. Photos, videos, financial records, communication logs, everything. But I want to present it in a very specific way. As Derek hung up, he walked to his window overlooking the city skyline. Each building represented years of his blood, sweat, and calculated risks. He'd built this empire from nothing, and now two people he'd trusted most in the world thought they could steal it from him. They were about to learn that Derek Thornton's mercy was as non-existent as his forgiveness. In his desk drawer, Derek pulled out a small digital recorder. For the past month, he'd been having very interesting conversations with several of Brad's former business partners. It seemed Brad had a pattern of betraying trust, though he'd been more careful in previous situations. Derek wasn't interested in previous situations. He was interested in complete and total destruction. His phone buzzed with a text from Ashley, home late tonight. Board meeting prep with Brad. Derek typed back, of course, darling. Take all the time you need. Then he deleted the message and opened his laptop to review the final phases of his plan. They thought they were the hunters. They were about to discover they'd been the prey all along. Chapter 3. The Trap Springs. Derek stood in the shadows of the parking garage beneath Brad's downtown penthouse, watching as Ashley's silver Mercedes pulled into the reserved space next to Brad's black BMW. It was 8:47 p.m. on a Thursday, their regular meeting time, according to the surveillance reports. 3 months had passed since Derek's partnership offer, and Brad had signed the papers with barely contained excitement. The morality clause had been reviewed by Brad's attorney, who'd missed the adultery subsection entirely. Derek's legal team had crafted it perfectly, hidden in plain sight among standard partnership language. Now, Derek had legal grounds for what was coming next. He watched Ashley and Brad embrace passionately as they entered the building's private elevator. Rodriguez's voice crackled through Derek's earpiece. Audio and video feeds are active. We have everything we need. Derek's jaw clenched as he thought about the past 3 months of watching his wife lie to his face every single day. She'd been especially affectionate lately, perhaps sensing that something was shifting, or perhaps she felt guilty about what she was planning. The guilt, Derek knew, was about to become irrelevant. His phone buzzed with a call from Mitchell, his lawyer. Derek, the board meeting is set for tomorrow at 2 p.m. I've sent the agenda to all members. They think it's a routine, quarterly review. Perfect. And Tyler, he'll be in school. Ashley won't be able to reach him until after everything's finished. Derek hung up and made his way to his car. Phase 1 was complete. He had legal grounds to destroy Brad financially. Phase 2 was about to begin. The next morning, Derek sat across from Ashley at breakfast, watching her scroll through her phone while picking at a croissant. Tyler had already left for school, complaining about a history test he'd forgotten to study for. You seem distracted, Derek observed. Ashley looked up with a bright smile. Just reviewing some charity committee notes. We're planning the annual gala, and there are so many details to coordinate. Derek nodded thoughtfully. You work so hard for those charities. I hope they appreciate your dedication. Of course they do. Ashley's phone buzzed, and Derek caught a glimpse of Brad's name on the screen before she casually flipped it face down. Actually, I might need to attend a planning meeting tonight. It could run late. Another late meeting, Derek said mildly. You've had quite a few of those lately. For just a moment, Ashley's composure cracked. Derek saw something flicker across her face. Fear, perhaps, or calculation. Well, you know how these society ladies can be. Everything has to be perfect. Derek stood and kissed her forehead gently. I know, darling. I'll see you tonight. As he left for the office, Derek's mind was already 3 steps ahead. By tonight, Ashley would understand exactly how perfect his own planning had been. At 2 p.m. sharp, Derek entered the boardroom where Thornton Hotel's 5-member board of directors waited. These weren't ceremonial positions. Each member represented significant investment capital and had real power over the company's direction. "Gentlemen," Derek began, taking his seat at the head of the table, "thank you for attending on short notice. I have some urgent matters to discuss regarding Brad Sinclair's partnership agreement." Board member Harrison Webb, a silver-haired former banking executive, frowned. "I thought that partnership was already finalized." It was. However, new information has come to light that triggers the morality clause in our agreement. Derek activated the wall-mounted screen and began his presentation. The first image was a high-resolution photograph of Brad and Ashley entering the downtown penthouse together. 3 months ago, I offered Brad Sinclair a 50-50 partnership in this company. As part of that agreement, he accepted certain behavioral standards designed to protect our company's reputation and the trust necessary for effective partnership. The next slide showed financial records. These documents prove that Mr. Sinclair has been systematically sharing confidential business information with his personal associates, including details about our expansion plans and investor relationships. Derek's voice remained calm and professional as he continued. "Furthermore, Mr. Sinclair has been conducting an intimate relationship with my wife, Ashley Thornton, in a property owned by this company, during company time, while using company resources to coordinate their meetings." The room fell silent. Derek could see the board members' faces shifting from confusion to understanding to anger. "The evidence is comprehensive," Derek continued, advancing through slides of photographs, phone records, and financial documentation. "Mr. Sinclair has violated both the specific terms of our partnership agreement and the fundamental trust that our business relationships require." Webb leaned forward. "Derek, this is devastating. What are you proposing?" "I'm invoking the immediate termination clause of our partnership agreement. As of this moment, Brad Sinclair is no longer a partner in Thornton Hotels. Security is currently removing him from the building and revoking all his access credentials." Derek's phone buzzed with a text from Rodriguez. "Package delivered. Target is in the lobby demanding to see you." "Gentlemen, Mr. Sinclair is about to demand access to this meeting. I suggest we adjourn so you can review the complete evidence package individually. I'll be available for questions once you've had time to process this information." As the board members filed out in stunned silence, Derek remained seated, savoring the moment. Through the building security cameras, he could see Brad Sinclair in the lobby, his face red with fury, arguing with security guards who were politely but firmly denying him access. Derek's intercom buzzed. "Mr. Thornton, there's a Brad Sinclair here demanding to see you. Tell Mr. Sinclair that all future communications should go through his attorney. He no longer has any business relationship with this company." Derek gathered his papers and walked to the elevator. As the doors closed, he could hear Brad shouting his name from the lobby. Phase 2 was complete. Brad Sinclair had just lost his partnership, his income, and his future in a single afternoon. But Derek wasn't finished. Phase 3 would destroy them both in ways they couldn't imagine. And Phase 4, well, that would have to wait 8 years for Tyler to make his move. Derek smiled as the elevator carried him toward the final act of his carefully orchestrated revenge. Chapter 4: The Exile. 8 years had passed since Derek Thornton had systematically destroyed Brad Sinclair's life and driven Ashley into exile. Now 50, Derek sat in his expanded study, reviewing quarterly reports from his hotel empire that had tripled in size during those years. The walls displayed photos from his business achievements, but notably absent were any family pictures. The divorce had been swift and brutal. Ashley had tried to fight for custody of Tyler, but Derek's evidence of her adultery and abandonment of her maternal duties had been overwhelming. The judge had been particularly unimpressed with the revelation that Ashley had been planning to relocate to California with Brad, effectively removing Tyler from his father's life without consent. Tyler, who had been 14 at the time, had chosen his side immediately and definitively. "Dad," He'd said the night Derek had shown him the evidence. I already knew. I saw them together months ago, but I didn't know how to tell you. That conversation had been one of Derek's few moments of genuine emotion during the entire ordeal. His son had been protecting him, carrying the burden of knowledge that would have destroyed most teenagers. But Tyler wasn't most teenagers. He was Derek's son. Derek's private investigator had tracked Ashley and Brad to San Diego, where they'd attempted to start a boutique consulting firm. Within 6 months, Derek had ensured that every major client they'd approached received detailed information about Brad's history of business betrayal and Ashley's marital infidelity. Their fledgling business had collapsed before it truly began. Brad had found work as a mid-level sales manager for a competing hotel chain, while Ashley had taken a position with a local charity organization. Derek's long reach in the hospitality industry had ensured that Brad's advancement opportunities remained permanently limited. As for Ashley, Derek's connections in the philanthropy world had made her persona non grata at any organization with serious funding. They weren't destitute, but they were exactly what Derek had intended them to become: irrelevant. Derek's phone interrupted his thoughts. The caller ID showed Tyler's number, which was unusual since his son typically texted unless something was urgent. "Tyler, Dad, we need to talk. I'm coming over." The line went dead before Derek could respond. He glanced at his watch, 9:30 p.m. Tyler, now 22 and completing his MBA at Wharton, rarely made unscheduled visits during the semester. 20 minutes later, Tyler entered the study without knocking, a privilege only he held in Derek's carefully controlled world. But something was different about his son's demeanor. The confident young man who'd been Derek's closest ally for 8 years looked nervous, almost guilty. "What's wrong?" Derek asked directly. Tyler sat down heavily in the leather chair across from Derek's desk. "I've been in contact with Mom." The words hit Derek like a physical blow. His expression didn't change, but his grip tightened on his bourbon glass. "For how long?" 6 months. Tyler's voice was steady, but Derek could see the tension in his shoulders. "She reached out when I turned 22. Said she wanted to explain her side of what happened." Derek set down his glass with deliberate care. "And what did she explain?" "She told me about Brad, about the affair. She doesn't deny any of that." Tyler leaned forward, his blue eyes, Ashley's eyes, meeting Derek's. "But she also told me about you, about the things you did after the divorce. Such as, she told me you destroyed their business systematically, that you used your connections to make sure Brad could never advance in his career, that you had them followed, harassed, blacklisted." Tyler's voice gained strength. "She told me you didn't just win the divorce. You tried to destroy their entire lives." Derek's laugh was cold and sharp. "And you believe her?" "I had it investigated." The room fell silent. Derek studied his son's face, seeing a determination that reminded him painfully of himself at that age. "You had it investigated," Derek repeated slowly. "I hired my own private investigator. I wanted to know the truth." Tyler pulled out a folder from his briefcase. "Do you want to know what I found?" Derek didn't respond, but Tyler continued anyway. "I found out that Mom was right about most of it. You did destroy their business. You did have Brad blacklisted. You've been monitoring their lives for 8 years. Tyler's voice hardened. "But I also found out things she didn't tell me." Tyler opened the folder and placed several photographs on Derek's desk. "I found out that Brad has been physically abusing her for the past 5 years. That she's been hospitalized twice for accidents that look suspiciously like domestic violence. That she's been trying to leave him, but can't because you've made sure she has no resources and no support system." Derek looked at the photographs without emotion. They showed Ashley with bruises, medical records, police reports that had been filed and mysteriously dropped. "And?" Derek asked. Tyler stared at his father in disbelief. "And? Dad, she's being beaten by the man she chose over our family. And your response is, and? She made her choice 8 years ago. The consequences of that choice are not my responsibility." Tyler stood up abruptly. "Jesus Christ, Dad. I know she hurt you. I know she betrayed us both. But she's still a human being. She's still my mother." Derek's voice remained perfectly controlled. "Your mother chose to abandon you for another man. She chose to betray the family that gave her everything. She chose to conspire against the business I built with my own hands. Derek stood as well, his presence imposing even across the desk. The fact that her choices led to consequences she didn't anticipate is not my concern. She wants to see you, Tyler said quietly. She wants to apologize. She wants to try to rebuild some kind of relationship with both of us. No, Dad, no. Derek's voice cut through the room like a blade. I told you 8 years ago, and I'm telling you now, I do not forgive betrayal. Ever. Under any circumstances. Tyler gathered the photographs and put them back in his folder. What if I told you that I'm planning to help her leave Brad? That I'm going to support her while she gets back on her feet? Derek's eyes narrowed. Then I would tell you that you're free to make that choice. But you should understand the consequences of that choice. What consequences? Derek walked to his wall safe and removed a thick legal document. This is my will, Tyler. As of today, you inherit everything. The hotels, the real estate, the investment portfolio, the offshore accounts. Everything I've built over the past 30 years. He placed the document on his desk. But my will contains a very specific clause. If you choose to provide material support to Ashley Thornton or Brad Sinclair, if you choose to rebuild a relationship with them against my explicit wishes, you forfeit your inheritance entirely. Tyler's face went pale. You're threatening to disinherit me? I'm offering you a choice. The same choice your mother had 8 years ago. Loyalty to this family or loyalty to the people who betrayed it. Derek returned the document to his safe. You have until your graduation to decide. If you choose to help your mother, I'll respect that decision. But I'll also honor my own principles. Tyler walked toward the door, then stopped. What happened to you, Dad? When did you become so cold that you can't forgive your own family? Derek didn't answer until Tyler's hand was on the doorknob. I became this way the day I learned that the people I trusted most in the world were planning to destroy everything I'd worked for. I became this way the day I realized that love and loyalty are weaknesses that people will exploit without hesitation. Derek's voice was quiet but deadly serious. I became this way so that no one could ever hurt me again. Tyler left without another word, and Derek returned to his desk. Outside his window, the city lights stretched toward the horizon, each one representing something he'd built or conquered. In 6 months, Tyler would graduate from business school. In 6 months, Derek would discover whether his son had inherited his principles or his mother's weaknesses. In 6 months, Derek would learn whether his carefully constructed world would survive its next betrayal. Chapter 5. The Long Game. 5 years had passed since Tyler's ultimatum, and Derek Thornton sat in his private study reviewing the latest reports on his expanding hotel empire. At 55, his hair was silver at the temples, but his mind remained as sharp and ruthless as ever. The company now operated in 12 countries, with assets exceeding $2 billion. Tyler had made his choice, and it hadn't surprised Derek. His son had graduated from Wharton with highest honors, then immediately used his trust fund, money Derek couldn't legally block, to relocate Ashley to a safe house in Denver and pay for her medical treatment and therapy. Tyler had also ensured that Brad Sinclair was arrested for domestic violence, though the charges had eventually been dropped due to Ashley's reluctance to testify. Derek had watched it all unfold with clinical detachment. When Tyler had called to inform him of his decision, Derek had listened in silence, then hung up without a word. 3 days later, Tyler received official notification that he had been removed from Derek's will and that all future financial support had been terminated. The young man who had once been Derek's greatest pride and chosen successor had become just another casualty of Derek's unbending principles. Tyler had tried to call, text, and email for months afterward. He'd even flown to the city and attempted to visit Derek's office, only to be informed by security that he was no longer welcome on company property. Derek had watched the security footage of his son standing in a lobby, looking lost and desperate, but he'd felt nothing. Derek Thornton did not forgive betrayal. Not from business partners, not from wives, and not from sons. The irony was that Tyler had inherited more of Derek's qualities than either of them had realized. Within 3 years of being cut off, Tyler had founded his own boutique investment firm specializing in hospitality acquisitions. The firm was small but successful, and Tyler had proven himself to be every bit as ruthless and strategic as his father. Derek knew this because he'd been monitoring Tyler's progress through third-party sources, not out of paternal pride or concern, but because Derek monitored all potential business threats. And Tyler was definitely becoming a threat. Derek's intercom buzzed. "Mr. Thornton, there's a Mitchell Hayes on line 1. He says it's urgent." Derek frowned. Mitchell had been his personal attorney for 15 years, handling everything from corporate law to his divorce. Urgent calls at 8 p.m. were unusual. "Derek," Mitchell's voice sounded strained when Derek picked up. "We have a problem. Tyler just filed a lawsuit against you." Derek leaned back in his chair. "What kind of lawsuit?" "He's claiming that you used undue influence to coerce him into signing away his inheritance rights. He's arguing that the ultimatum you gave him constituted emotional duress and that the disinheritance is legally invalid." Derek's laugh was cold. "He signed those papers voluntarily. We have witnesses. It's more complicated than that." Tyler's legal team has assembled a very sophisticated argument about parental manipulation and psychological coercion. They're claiming that your pattern of controlling behavior throughout his childhood created a power dynamic that made true consent impossible. Derek stood and walked to his window. "What are they asking for?" "Complete restoration of his inheritance rights, plus damages for 8 years of financial hardship and emotional distress." "Derek, if they win, they could claim everything: the hotels, the real estate, the offshore accounts." "Who's representing him?" "That's the other problem. He's hired Lawson and Associates." Derek's jaw tightened. Lawson and Associates was one of the most prestigious family law firms in the country, specializing in complex inheritance disputes. They were expensive, highly skilled, and had a reputation for taking on cases they believed they could win. How is he affording Lawson and Associates? Mitchell's pause was telling. "Derek, there's something else. Tyler isn't just suing for his inheritance. He's also filed a motion for immediate access to your financial records, claiming he needs them to prove the extent of his damages." Derek's mind began working through the implications. Tyler wasn't just trying to reclaim his inheritance. He was trying to gain access to Derek's complete financial structure. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, the complex web of holdings that Derek had spent decades constructing. "He's planning a takeover," Derek said quietly. "That's what I'm afraid of. If he gets access to your financial records and wins the inheritance case, he could effectively control your entire empire." Derek set down the phone and walked to his safe. Inside were documents he'd hoped never to use, contingency plans he developed over the years for various worst-case scenarios. One folder was labeled simply Tyler. Derek had always known this day might come. Tyler was his son, after all, and Derek had trained him too well to expect simple acceptance of defeat. But Derek had been planning for this possibility for 8 years. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he'd memorized but never used. "Rodriguez, I need you to activate Protocol 7. "Are you sure, boss?" "Protocol 7 is pretty extreme." Derek looked out at the city lights that represented his empire. "Tyler wants to play with the big boys. It's time he learned what that really means." Derek hung up and opened his laptop. There were phone calls to make, documents to transfer, and accounts to relocate. Tyler thought he was launching a surprise attack, but he was about to discover that Derek Thornton had been preparing for war since the day his son chose betrayal over loyalty. As Derek began typing, his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Dad, I'm sorry it's come to this, but you left me no choice. I'll see you in court. Tyler." Derek stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Tomorrow, Tyler would discover that declaring war on Derek Thornton was very different from surviving it. The long game Derek had been playing was about to reach its conclusion, and Tyler was about to learn why his father had never lost a fight that truly mattered. Chapter 6: The Counterstrike. Derek Thornton stood in the conference room of his corporate headquarters at 6 a.m., reviewing the overnight reports from his legal team. 3 weeks had passed since Tyler's lawsuit had been filed, and Derek's counter-strategy was now ready for implementation. The room's mahogany table was covered with documents, financial records, and legal briefs. Derek's team consisted of 5 attorneys from different firms, 2 forensic accountants, and his head of security. Each had been working around the clock to prepare what Derek privately called the education of Tyler Thornton. Status report, Derek said without preamble. His lead attorney, Patricia Morrison from Blackstone & Associates, spoke first. Tyler's legal team has filed motions for discovery on all your financial holdings. They want complete access to your business records, personal accounts, and offshore holdings going back 20 years. Derek nodded. Expected. What's our response? We're filing counter-motions claiming attorney-client privilege on business communications, and we're arguing that Tyler's claims of emotional distress are fabricated. But Derek, they have a strong case on the undue influence angle. Derek's forensic accountant, a former IRS investigator named Shun, spoke next. Tyler's funding for this lawsuit is interesting. He's not just using his investment firm's resources. Someone else is backing this play. Who? Chun slid a folder across the table. We traced the payments to Lawson and Associates back to their source. Tyler's being funded by a consortium of investors who specialize in hostile takeovers of family businesses. They're betting that if Tyler wins, they can force you to sell company assets to pay the judgment. Derek's smile was predatory. So Tyler isn't just trying to reclaim his inheritance. He's trying to destroy the company entirely. It appears so. If they win and the judgment is large enough, you'd be forced to liquidate significant assets to pay it. Tyler's investors would then have opportunities to purchase those assets at below-market prices. Derek turned to Rodriguez, his security chief. Protocol 7 status? Fully operational. We've documented Tyler's association with the investment consortium, and we've traced their funding sources back to some very interesting places. Rodriguez placed a thick folder on the table. Derek, Tyler's investors aren't just vulture capitalists. 2 of them have connections to organized crime families in Las Vegas and Miami. They specialize in using legal pressure to force business owners into situations where they have to sell to criminal enterprises for laundering purposes. The room fell silent. Derek's expression didn't change, but everyone present understood the implications. Tyler doesn't know about the criminal connections, Rodriguez continued. Our surveillance suggests he believes he's working with legitimate investors. But if this lawsuit succeeds, he'll be handing your empire over to people who will use it for money laundering and other illegal activities. Derek walked to the window overlooking the city. How long before Tyler discovers what he's gotten himself into? Based on our projections, about 6 months. Once the investors realize they can't control you through legal means, they'll start pressuring Tyler to take more aggressive actions. When Tyler refuses, they'll either cut him loose or... Rodriguez didn't finish the sentence. Or they'll eliminate him as a liability, Derek said quietly. Patricia Morrison leaned forward. Derek, we need to discuss strategy. Do you want to warn Tyler about what he's gotten himself into? Derek's laugh was cold. Tyler made his choice 8 years ago when he chose to support his mother over his family. He made another choice 3 weeks ago when he decided to sue me. Now he's made a third choice by accepting money from criminals to fund his attack on everything I've built. Derek turned back to face the room. Tyler is a grown man who believes he's smarter than everyone around him. He's about to learn the consequences of that arrogance. What are your instructions? Patricia asked. Derek returned to his seat at the head of the table. We're going to give Tyler exactly what he's asking for. We'll provide complete financial disclosure as requested. We'll cooperate fully with discovery. We'll make this the most transparent legal proceeding in corporate history. The attorneys exchanged confused glances. Chin was the first to speak. Derek, if you provide complete disclosure, Tyler will be able to see your entire financial structure. That will give him enormous leverage. Exactly. Derek's smile was deadly. Tyler wants to know how my empire works? I'm going to show him. Every account, every investment, every transaction. And when he sees the complete picture, he's going to realize that destroying me means destroying himself. Derek stood and walked to his personal safe, removing a document folder he'd been preparing for years. Gentlemen, Tyler believes he's inherited my strategic mind, but not my principles. He thinks he can outmaneuver me, using my own lessons against me. Derek placed the folder on the table. He's about to discover that every lesson I taught him was designed with this moment in mind. Derek opened the folder to reveal a complex organizational chart showing the true structure of his business empire. What Tyler didn't know, what no one except Derek and his most trusted advisors knew, was that Tyler had never actually been removed from Derek's inheritance. He'd been moved. For the past 8 years, Derek explained, I've been transferring assets into irrevocable trusts that name Tyler as the ultimate beneficiary. Not Tyler the son, but Tyler the business entity. Every major acquisition, every profitable venture, every growth opportunity has been structured so that Tyler will inherit it automatically upon my death. The room was silent as the implications sank in. Tyler's lawsuit, if successful, won't give him control of my empire, Derek continued. It will trigger clauses in dozens of trust agreements that will immediately transfer ownership to him, whether he wants it or not. And because of his association with criminal investors, Tyler will find himself personally liable for any illegal activities those investors attempt to conduct using my assets. Patricia Morrison stared at the documents in amazement. Derek, this is incredible. You've been planning Tyler's inheritance for 8 years while simultaneously punishing him for betraying you. I've been preparing Tyler to inherit an empire, Derek corrected. But I've also been ensuring that he can only inherit it on my terms, with my principles, and with complete understanding of what it means to be Derek Thornton's son. Derek gathered the documents and returned them to his safe. Tyler wants a war? He can have one. But he's about to learn that in any war with Derek Thornton, the only way to win is to become Derek Thornton. As the meeting adjourned, Derek remained alone in the conference room, looking out at the city his empire dominated. In 6 months, Tyler would realize that his lawsuit had been a trap designed to force him back into Derek's world. And by then, it would be too late for Tyler to escape the destiny Derek had been constructing for him since the day he chose betrayal over loyalty. Derek Thornton's son was about to learn that some inheritances came with a price that couldn't be refused. Chapter 7. The Inheritance Trap. Derek Thornton sat in his study at 3 a.m., reading the final reports from his legal team. The lawsuit had been proceeding for 6 months, and Tyler's discovery requests had been granted by the court. Tomorrow, Derek would be required to provide complete financial disclosure of his empire. Every account, every holding, every carefully constructed layer of his business structure. Tyler had no idea he was about to walk into the most elegant trap Derek had ever constructed. Derek's phone buzzed with a secure message from Rodriguez. Target has discovered investor connections. Meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning before court. Derek smiled coldly. Tyler had finally realized what kind of people were funding his lawsuit. The young man who thought he could outmaneuver his father was about to learn that Derek had been orchestrating every move of this chess game from the beginning. At 8 a.m., Derek arrived at the courthouse for what would be the final phase of Tyler's legal education. He wore his most expensive suit and carried a briefcase containing documents that would change both their lives forever. Tyler was already in the courtroom with his legal team, and Derek could see the strain on his son's face. The confident young man who had filed this lawsuit 6 months ago looked older, more desperate, and finally beginning to understand the forces he'd unleashed. Judge Catherine Walsh called the proceedings to order. Mr. Thornton, the court has ordered you to provide complete financial disclosure. Are you prepared to comply? Derek stood. Yes, Your Honor. In fact, I'm prepared to exceed the court's requirements. He opened his briefcase and removed a thick binder. Your Honor, this document contains not only my complete financial holdings, but also the legal structures I've established over the past 8 years to ensure the proper succession of my business empire. Tyler's lead attorney looked confused. Your Honor, we weren't seeking information about succession planning. Nevertheless, Derek said, I believe it's relevant to my son's claims about his inheritance rights. Derek handed copies of the document to Tyler's legal team and began his testimony. Your Honor, 8 years ago, my son Tyler made certain choices that led me to remove him from my will. However, what Tyler doesn't understand is that I never actually disinherited him. Tyler's head snapped up, his eyes wide with confusion. Derek continued, "Instead, I restructured my entire empire to ensure that Tyler would inherit everything, but only under specific circumstances that would guarantee he understood the full responsibilities of that inheritance." Derek's attorney, Patricia Morrison, stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Thornton would like to present Exhibit A, the Thornton Family Trust Network." The court clerk distributed copies of a complex organizational chart that showed the true structure of Derek's business empire. What everyone saw was a web of trusts, holding companies, and subsidiaries that defied easy comprehension. "Over the past 8 years," Derek explained, "I have transferred approximately 90% of my assets into a network of irrevocable trusts. These trusts are structured so that Tyler Thornton automatically becomes the beneficiary and controlling trustee under 2 specific conditions." Derek's voice remained calm and professional as he delivered the killing blow. "First, if Tyler initiates legal action to claim his inheritance, which he has done through this lawsuit. Second, if Tyler demonstrates his willingness to ally himself with criminal enterprises to achieve his goals, which he has done by accepting funding from investors with documented connections to organized crime." The courtroom erupted. Tyler's attorneys were frantically flipping through documents, trying to understand what Derek had just revealed. Tyler himself looked like he'd been physically struck. Judge Walsh banged her gavel. "Order. Mr. Thornton, are you claiming that this lawsuit has triggered automatic inheritance provisions?" "Yes, Your Honor. As of this morning, Tyler Thornton legally owns controlling interests in Thornton Hotels, Thornton Real Estate Holdings, Thornton Investment Group, and 17 subsidiary companies. The total value of these assets is approximately $2 billion. Derek turned to look directly at Tyler. "However, there are certain conditions attached to this inheritance that Tyler needs to understand." Patricia Morrison handed Derek another document. "Your Honor, the trust agreements contain specific provisions regarding criminal liability and business practices." Derek's voice took on a harder edge. "Because Tyler has accepted funding from investors with criminal connections, he is now personally liable for any illegal activities those investors attempt to conduct using assets Tyler now controls. Furthermore, the trust agreements require Tyler to immediately terminate all relationships with these investors and assume full personal responsibility for the empire he now owns." Tyler finally found his voice. What were you saying?" Derek's smile was cold and triumphant. "I'm saying you've gotten exactly what you wanted, Tyler. You now own everything I've built. But you own it under my terms, according to my principles, and with full understanding of what it means to be Derek Thornton's successor." Derek stood and walked toward Tyler's table. "You wanted to destroy me to claim your inheritance? Congratulations. You've just inherited the responsibility of protecting $2 billion in assets from the criminals you brought into our lives." Tyler's lead attorney stood. "Your Honor, this is clearly some kind of manipulation." "Actually," Judge Walsh interrupted, having reviewed the trust documents, "this appears to be entirely legal. Mr. Thornton has created a complex but valid succession structure that automatically transfers ownership based on specific triggering events." Derek returned to his seat. "Tyler, your criminal investors expect their return on investment. They've funded your lawsuit with the expectation that you would either gain control of my assets or force me to liquidate them. Now that you control those assets, they're going to expect you to deliver on their investment." Derek's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "The question is, Tyler, what are you going to do when they demand that you use Thornton Hotels for money laundering? What are you going to do when they insist that you provide them with access to our offshore accounts? What are you going to do when they realize that the only way to get their return is to eliminate the inconvenient son who now owns everything they want?" Tyler's face went pale as the full implications hit him. Derek stood to leave. "Your Honor, I believe this concludes the proceedings. Tyler has his inheritance. Now he gets to learn what it actually costs to be Derek Thornton's son." As Derek walked toward the courtroom door, Tyler called out desperately, Dad, wait." Derek stopped but didn't turn around. "You made your choice 8 years ago, Tyler. You made another choice 6 months ago. Now you get to live with the consequences of those choices." Derek left the courtroom, knowing that Tyler was finally about to understand the difference between inheriting power and earning the right to wield it. Outside the courthouse, Derek's phone was already ringing with calls from Tyler's criminal investors. They wanted to know what had happened in court, and they wanted to schedule immediate meetings with their new business partner. Derek answered the first call with a smile. "This is Derek Thornton. I'm afraid you'll need to speak with Tyler now. He's the owner of everything you're interested in." Tyler Thornton had spent 8 years believing he could outmaneuver his father. Now he was about to learn that Derek's greatest revenge was giving Tyler exactly what he thought he wanted. Chapter 8: The Prodigal's Return. 3 years had passed since the courtroom revelation that had transformed Tyler from plaintiff to inheritor overnight. Derek Thornton, now 58, stood in his private study, now significantly smaller since most of his assets had transferred to Tyler's control, reviewing security reports that had become his primary source of entertainment. Tyler had survived his criminal investors, but barely. The young man who had thought he could play in Derek's world had learned within weeks that inheriting an empire and controlling it were vastly different skills. The criminal consortium that had funded his lawsuit had expected immediate returns on their investment, and Tyler's refusal to use company assets for money laundering had triggered exactly the kind of response Derek had predicted. 2 attempts on Tyler's life, 1 kidnapping of his girlfriend, and a coordinated attack on multiple hotel properties had taught Tyler everything he needed to know about the true cost of power. To his credit, Tyler had fought back with tactics that would have made Derek proud. He'd used his inherited resources to hire private military contractors, had systematically exposed his former investors to federal authorities, and had ruthlessly eliminated every threat to his business empire. The young man Derek had raised had finally emerged from the naive idealist who'd chosen betrayal over loyalty. But the cost had been devastating. Tyler had lost his girlfriend, who'd left him after the kidnapping. He'd been forced to kill 2 men in self-defense. He'd watched 3 of his hotels burn to the ground and had seen loyal employees murdered for refusing to provide information to his enemies. Derek had observed it all from a distance, providing no assistance and offering no comfort. Now Tyler controlled the empire Derek had built, but he controlled alone, just as Derek always had. Derek's contemplation was interrupted by his doorbell, an unusual occurrence since his penthouse apartment required security clearance to access. Derek checked his monitors and saw a familiar figure standing in his hallway. Tyler Thornton, now 25, looked like a different person from the confident young man who'd filed a lawsuit 3 years ago. His face was harder, his eyes colder, his posture that of someone who'd learned to sleep with one eye open. Derek opened the door without speaking. "Dad," Tyler said simply. "Tyler." They stood in the doorway for a long moment, 2 men who shared everything and nothing. "May I come in?" Derek stepped aside wordlessly. Tyler entered the apartment and looked around at the space that was elegant, but significantly smaller than Derek's former estate. "Nice place. Smaller than I expected. I find I need less space these days," Derek replied. "Most of my assets are elsewhere now." Tyler nodded, understanding the reference. "I try to give it back, after I realized what you'd done. I try to transfer everything back to you." Derek poured 2 glasses of bourbon and handed one to Tyler. "But you couldn't. The trust structures are ironclad. Once triggered, they can't be reversed." Tyler took a sip and winced slightly. "You really thought of everything." They moved to Derek's living room, sitting across from each other like negotiators rather than family. "Why are you here, Tyler?" Tyler stared into his bourbon for a long moment before answering. "Because I need to tell you that you were right." Derek's expression didn't change, but he gestured for Tyler to continue. "You were right about loyalty. You were right about betrayal. You were right about the cost of power and the price of weakness." Tyler's voice was steady but tired. "You were right about everything." Derek sipped his bourbon and waited. "I spent 3 years learning lessons you tried to teach me in one conversation 8 years ago," Tyler continued. "I had to watch good people die because I was naive enough to think I could play games with criminals. I had to become someone I didn't recognize just to survive the world I thought I was smart enough to navigate." Tyler stood and walked to Derek's window, looking out at the city lights below. "I became you, Dad. Ruthless, calculating, incapable of trusting anyone completely. And the worst part is, I understand now why you had to become that way. Derek joined Tyler at the window. What happened to Ashley? Tyler's jaw tightened. She died 2 years ago. Cancer. She tried to reach out to both of us before she died, but Tyler's voice trailed off. But neither of us would take her calls, Derek finished. I went to her funeral, Tyler said quietly. Brad was there. He looked broken old. He tried to apologize to me for everything that happened. What did you tell him? Tyler's smile was cold and familiar. I told him that some things can't be forgiven. Derek nodded approvingly. Dad, Tyler said, turning to face him, I understand now why you did what you did. The trap, the inheritance, everything. You weren't just punishing me for betraying you. You were preparing me for what it really means to carry our name. Derek set down his bourbon glass. And what does it mean? It means being alone. It means never fully trusting anyone. It means making decisions that other people will call cruel or heartless because those are the only decisions that protect what matters. Tyler's voice grew stronger. It means understanding that family loyalty isn't about love, it's about survival. Derek studied his son's face, seeing his own hardness reflected there. You've learned well. I had a good teacher. They stood in silence for several minutes, watching the city Derek had once dominated and Tyler now controlled. There's something else, Tyler said finally. I have a son. Derek's expression flickered for just a moment. Surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. His name is Derek. He's 6 months old. Tyler's voice softened slightly. His mother and I aren't together. She couldn't handle what my life became, but she agreed to let me raise him. Tyler turned to face Derek directly. I want him to know his grandfather, and I want you to help me teach him what it really means to be a Thornton. Derek was quiet for a long time, processing this information. You want me to help you raise him the way I raised you? Derek asked finally. I want you to help me raise him the way you should have raised me from the beginning, Tyler corrected. With no illusions about the world we live in. No false beliefs about loyalty or forgiveness. No naive faith in other people's goodness. Derek walked to his safe and removed a photograph he'd kept hidden for 8 years. A picture of Tyler at 14, standing beside Derek at a company board meeting. In the photo, Tyler was smiling with genuine happiness and pride. Derek looked at the photograph, then at the hardened man his son had become. Tyler, Derek said carefully, are you asking me to help you destroy your son's innocence the way I destroyed yours? Tyler's answer was immediate and unflinching. I'm asking you to help me prepare him for the world that will try to destroy him, whether he's innocent or not. Derek placed the photograph on his coffee table where both men could see it. When do I meet my grandson? Tyler's smile was the first genuine expression Derek had seen from him since he'd entered the apartment. Tomorrow, if you're free. But Dad, Tyler's voice took on the same hard edge Derek recognized from his own speech. If you're going to be part of his life, you need to understand something. I won't make the mistakes you made with me. I won't let sentiment or false hope cloud my judgment. My son will learn our lessons, but he'll learn them from strength, not from betrayal. Derek extended his hand to Tyler, not as a father to his son, but as one businessman acknowledging another. Welcome home, Tyler. As they shook hands, Derek realized that his greatest triumph wasn't the empire he'd built or the enemies he'd destroyed. It was standing in his living room, looking into the face of a man who had finally become worthy of carrying the Thornton name. The prodigal son had returned, but he'd returned as Derek's equal, not his heir. And tomorrow, Derek would meet the next generation of Thornton men, a grandson who would learn from both their mistakes and their victories. The cycle was beginning again, but this time, they would build it together. Chapter 9, Blood and Legacy. Derek Thornton stood in the nursery of Tyler's penthouse apartment, holding 6-month-old Derek Thornton III. A child who would grow up knowing truths that had taken his father and grandfather decades to learn through pain and betrayal. The baby had Derek's dark hair and Tyler's blue eyes, and when he gripped Derek's finger with surprising strength, the old man felt something he'd thought was permanently dead inside him. Hope for the future rather than merely satisfaction with the past. He's strong, Derek observed, watching his grandson's alert gaze track movements around the room. He'll need to be, Tyler replied, reviewing documents at a nearby desk. Even in his son's nursery, Tyler maintained the hypervigilance that had kept him alive through 3 years of corporate warfare. Derek had spent the past 6 months rebuilding his relationship with Tyler, but it wasn't the warm reconciliation that Ashley might have hoped for years ago. Instead, it was a partnership between two men who understood power, respected ruthlessness, and shared an uncompromising view of human nature. Tyler had proven himself worthy of Derek's teachings by surviving every trial Derek had engineered for him. The criminal investors, the attempts on his life, the systematic destruction of everything he'd once believed about trust and loyalty. Tyler had emerged from it all as hard and unforgiving as Derek himself. More importantly, Tyler had learned to see Derek's original betrayal not as cruelty, but as preparation for a world that showed no mercy to the weak. Derek's reflection was interrupted by the sound of his secure phone ringing. Only 3 people had that number: Tyler, Rodriguez, and his lawyer. "Rodriguez here, boss. We have a problem." Derek stepped out of the nursery to take the call privately. "What kind of problem?" "Brad Sinclair is dead. Apparent suicide, but the circumstances are suspicious." Derek felt a cold satisfaction settle over him. Details. Found in his apartment this morning with a note confessing to the embezzlement of several $1,000,000 from his current employer. But Derek, the embezzlement was discovered only yesterday, and the amount missing is exactly equal to the debt he owed to some very unfriendly people. Derek understood immediately. Someone staged this to make his death look like guilt-driven suicide rather than murder. That's what I'm thinking. And Derek, there's something else. Before he died, Brad tried to contact Tyler, left several voicemails about wanting to make things right and reveal the truth about what really happened. Derek's mind began calculating possibilities. What truth? Unknown. But Derek, if Brad had information that could have changed the narrative about what happened 8 years ago. "It doesn't matter," Derek interrupted. "Brad is dead. Ashley is dead. And Tyler has learned everything he needs to know about the cost of betrayal." Derek hung up and returned to the nursery, where Tyler was now holding his son. "Bad news?" Tyler asked, having obviously heard Derek's tone during the phone call. "Brad Sinclair is dead. Apparent suicide." Tyler's expression didn't change. "Good." Derek studied his son's face, looking for any trace of remorse or uncertainty. He found none. "Tyler, don't you want to know why he died or what he might have wanted to tell you?" Tyler looked up from his son to meet Derek's eyes. "Dad, 8 years ago, Brad Sinclair chose to betray the man who trusted him most in the world. 3 years ago, he sat at my mother's funeral and tried to apologize for destroying our family. Last week, he apparently tried to contact me about making things right." Tyler's voice was completely calm. "I don't care why he's dead. I don't care what secrets he took with him. I don't care what version of the truth he wanted to reveal. Brad Sinclair ceased to matter the moment he chose betrayal over loyalty." Derek nodded approvingly. "And if you discovered that I had arranged his death?" Tyler's smile was cold and familiar. "Then I would congratulate you on finally closing a chapter that should have ended years ago." Derek reached into his jacket and pulled out a small digital recorder. "As it happens, I didn't arrange Brad's death, but I did arrange for this." He pressed play, and Brad Sinclair's voice filled the room, a recording from the night before his death. "Tyler, I know you won't take my calls, but I need you to know the truth about your father. Derek Thornton is the most dangerous man I've ever known, and I'm not talking about business. I'm talking about what he did to your mother, what he did to me, and what he's probably planning to do to you." Tyler's expression remained unchanged as Brad's voice continued. "Your father didn't just destroy our business. He systematically ruined every aspect of our lives for 8 years. He had us followed, harassed, blacklisted from everything. But worse than that, Tyler, he manipulated you. The whole inheritance trap, the criminal investors, everything that happened to you. Derek orchestrated all of it to force you back under his control." Derek watched Tyler's face carefully as Brad's recorded voice delivered his final accusation. "Your father didn't just want revenge for our betrayal, Tyler. He wanted to prove that he could break you down and rebuild you in his image. Every lesson you learned, every hardship you endured, every person you lost. It was all part of Derek's design to create a successor who would be as ruthless and unforgiving as he is. The recording ended with Brad's voice breaking. "I'm leaving town tomorrow. If something happens to me, if I disappear or die under suspicious circumstances, you'll know that Derek Thornton has finally eliminated the last witness to what he really is." Derek turned off the recorder and waited for Tyler's response. Tyler looked down at his son, then back at Derek. "Is it true? Which part?" "All of it. Did you orchestrate everything that happened to me over the past 3 years?" Derek's answer was immediate and unflinching. "Yes." Tyler was quiet for a long moment, processing this confirmation of Brad's accusations. "The criminal investors, the attempts on my life, everything I suffered, you planned it all? I created the conditions that made it inevitable," Derek corrected. "You chose to file the lawsuit. You chose to accept money from criminals. You chose to fight rather than surrender. I simply ensured that you would face the full consequences of those choices." Tyler stood and placed his son in his crib, then turned to face Derek with an expression that was impossible to read. "Why?" Derek's voice was steady and certain. "Because I needed to know if you were capable of becoming the man our family requires. Because I needed to know if you could survive in our world without the protection I'd always provided. Because I needed to know if you would choose strength over sentiment when your survival depended on it." Derek stepped closer to his son. "Tyler, everything I did to you, the world would have done eventually. Every lesson you learned through pain and loss, you would have learned anyway, but you might have learned them too late to survive them." Tyler was silent for several minutes, looking down at his sleeping son. Finally, he spoke. "So Brad was right. You manipulated me, broke me down, and rebuilt me to be your successor." "Yes." Tyler nodded slowly. "And if I had been weaker, if I had broken completely, you would have let me die rather than compromise your principles." "Yes." Tyler's smile was sharp and cold. "Good." Derek blinked in surprise. "Good. Dad, for the past 6 months, I've been wondering if you'd gone soft. If becoming a grandfather might make you sentimental or weak." Tyler's voice carried the same hard certainty Derek recognized from his own speech. "I'm relieved to know that you're still the man who taught me that survival requires absolute commitment to absolute principles." Tyler picked up his son and looked directly into Derek's eyes. "My son will grow up knowing exactly what it means to be a Thornton. He'll understand from the beginning that the world is full of people like Brad Sinclair and Ashley Greenwood, people who will betray you the moment it serves their interests." Derek felt a pride so deep it was almost painful. "And if he ever betrays you?" Tyler's answer was immediate. "Then I'll do to him what you did to me. I'll break him down and rebuild him, or I'll cut him loose entirely." Derek extended his hand to Tyler for the second time in 6 months, but this time it felt different. This wasn't reconciliation between father and son. It was recognition between equals. "Welcome to the family business, Tyler." As they shook hands, Derek realized that his greatest victory wasn't the empire he'd built or the enemies he'd destroyed. It was standing in his grandson's nursery, looking at a man who had been forged by betrayal and hardship into someone worthy of carrying their name into the future. The Thornton legacy would continue, but it would continue with no illusions about love, loyalty, or forgiveness. It would continue with absolute clarity about what it took to survive in a world that showed no mercy to the weak. Derek looked down at his sleeping grandson and smiled. The boy would grow up knowing truths that most people never learned. That trust was earned through strength, that loyalty was maintained through fear, and that forgiveness was a luxury that could cost everything. In 18 years, when Derek Thornton III came of age, he would inherit an empire built on uncompromising principles and maintained through ruthless commitment to those principles. And if he ever chose betrayal over loyalty, he would discover that his father and grandfather had taught him everything he needed to know about the consequences of that choice. The cycle was complete. The prodigal son had returned as the avenging father, and the next generation was already being prepared for their role in the family business. Derek Thornton had won every war that mattered, and now his victory would echo through generations of men who understood that in the Thornton family, forgiveness was not an option. It was a weakness that could destroy everything they'd built. As Derek left Tyler's apartment that evening, His phone buzzed with a text from his son. "Dad, I found Brad's note." He claimed he had evidence that could expose the truth about what happened 8 years ago. "Should I be concerned?" Derek typed back. "The only truth that matters is that we survived and they didn't. Delete the note and forget Brad Sinclair ever existed." Tyler's response was immediate. "Already done. See you tomorrow for dinner." Derek smiled as he walked to his car. Tyler had truly learned everything Derek had tried to teach him. The Thornton legacy was secure for another generation. And somewhere in the city, anyone who had ever considered betraying the Thornton family could rest assured that the consequences would be swift, final, and absolutely unforgiving. Derek Thornton's war was over, but his victory would last forever. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.